joins us for this conversation too. Mark, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. It's easy to just say, let me get your expectations. But let me rather do this. You're Enoch Godongwana, and you have to be on that podium today and outline the MTBPS. 4 focus areas.
Quite simple. First of all, no new spending. There's absolutely no avenue for us to fund any new government expenditure. We can't increase taxes. South Africans are already overburdened. And by the way, they spend money better than the state does. At the same time, we can't increase our debt levels because our debt service cost is already 22 Rand out of every 100. So if I was Enoch standing on the stage, the first thing I'd commit to is no new government expenditure in this budget cycle. The second thing would be to say that while we're not going to be increasing expenditure, we're going to make current expenditure a lot more efficient. Now, we need to be very clear on what we're saying here. We now need to embed, and we hope that this will be announced, and I've asked the Minister, this would be the second thing I would announce, is a embedding of a culture of spending reviews. And what that means is within each department, with every budget cycle, we need to find inefficiencies, we need to announce those, and we need to eliminate them. This would include a range of things, but we're talking about the looting, we're talking about the ghost workers, but we're also talking about departments that have just gotten used to glut over time. We need to cut some of that fat and find efficiency in the way that governments spend.
So raising accountability, basically.
Absolutely, and that accountability needs to be practical. We need to make sure that the spending that we incur is efficient. And the reason we need to do this is because South Africans have lost trust in the way that government spends money. And so for us to re-establish that trust, we need to show that we're spending money responsibly. The third thing is, as we've now said, when there can be no new spending, there can be no new taxes, whether that's income tax increases, corporate tax increases, or value-added tax. And then finally, what I would announce is I would talk about the acceleration of the reforms needed to get the economy going again. Sometimes we can talk in broad terms about the economy and people sort of check out, but you just need to understand this. When government is raising about 27% of the GDP through this mechanism of taxation, then the best way to make sure that you've got more revenue to fund critical social services and otherwise is to grow the economy. And unless we get these reforms accelerated, the economy will not grow. We need to make sure our ports are efficient, our railway is working, our support industries are working, electricity is devolved, and so on. And if we get these things right, if we get these 4 things right, if the DA had a Minister of Finance to announce the speech today, we genuinely believe that we can get South Africa firing again. And this place is a rocket ship waiting to go off.
Let me challenge you on that then. If you're going to challenge the reforms that we need to put in place, won't those change your spending priorities, ultimately meaning you may spend differently, which means you could spend more, meaning you could need more money, which goes against 2 of the 3 things you've just made note of?
The reality is finding inefficiencies does not need to change your spending priorities. But let's assume for a moment that you're right. Let's say that we now identify through these spending reviews things that need to be done more efficiently. One of the unintended terrible consequences of the sprawling bureaucracy that is our state at the moment is it actually gets in the way of people wanting to do things. So when we have a department that's only responsibility is issuing licenses, and those licenses then become a compliance exercise because somehow people think of that compliance exercise as a job creator. Instead of saying we need to get out of the way of industry, we need to get out of the way of individuals. And by the way, South Africans are extremely resilient and are innovative. They just get stuff done. We need to get out of their way. So it's our contention that as much as we're able to limit the influence of the state and how people do things, the more the economy will take off. So by implication, it's then our contention that if we're able to make our spending more efficient, we'll have less of a bureaucratic state, and people will be able to participate in the economy a bit more freely.
The worry for people might be, though, however, that some services then stop being free, stop being able to be had by people because they've been taken over by maybe private institutions, by ordinary South Africans, and then it becomes for profit as opposed to for the people. And that could be a primary issue where government needs to take further responsibility. Should we not be entrenching and making government far more responsible, far more able to do these things in an efficient manner?
I have a lot of empathy for the position that the DA is always trying to privatize, which is not our intention in all cases. But the simple answer to your question is, it would seem to me that if you could, you would. And if the state was able to make itself more efficient, responsible, not have Tembisa looting examples, then we wouldn't see that. So it seems to me that the more the state can get out of people's lives while focusing on the critical things that we do need the state to provide, such as education, such as healthcare, such as policemen and women, Those things need to remain in place, and in fact we need to double down on those investments for society. And at the same time, the DA is not proposing that we cut any social spending, but what we are saying is we need to be more responsible in how this gets allocated. When we know that there are issues with how broken NSFAS is, when we can read in the news about how broken SASSA is, the DA is not saying those things need to be taken away. The DA is saying those things need to be made better, and then where the state is getting in the way of the private sector, where license issuing is actually the issue of an industry taking off. And the media is one example here, but there are many others. If the state can just get out of the way, things might just run a bit better.
All right, Mark, very interesting. Thank you so much for that. DA